For years, my childhood home had been my sanctuary, a place where I laughed, cried, grew, and built memories that would never fade. Every corner of the house held a piece of my past: the stairway where I sat for long talks with my mother, the kitchen where the scent of her cooking lingered, the backyard where my siblings and I spent summers chasing fireflies. It wasn't just a house, it was a piece of me. So when my family claimed it as their own, telling me you don't need it anymore, it felt like they weren't just taking away a building. They were taking away everything I had left. Please subscribe to our channel and help us to reach 1,000 subscribers, please. Just to subscribe. It all started subtly. My father had always been practical, always thinking about family needs rather than personal connections. He hinted that since I had moved out and built a life elsewhere, the house wasn't really mine anymore. My siblings echoed his sentiments, saying, "It's just sitting there. What's the point of keeping it empty?" I shrugged off their remarks at first, thinking they were just making conversation. Then, the comments turned into full-fledged discussions. One afternoon, my father called me for a family meeting, something we hadn't done in years. As I sat in the living room, surrounded by familiar faces that now felt strangely distant, he cleared his throat. "We've made a decision," he said firmly, as though I wasn't part of the family anymore, only an outsider being informed of their plans. I raised an eyebrow. "What decision?" "The house," my mother chimed in. "We've decided that since you don't live here anymore, it makes sense for us to take ownership. We're moving in permanently." I blinked, my stomach tightening. "You're moving in? What does that even mean?" My younger brother leaned forward, nodding eagerly. "We've started making changes. Dad already talked to someone about renovations." Renovations? The words hit me like a punch. They had already assumed I would surrender, assumed I would step aside without protest, assumed that my childhood home, the place tied to every piece of my heart, was simply theirs to claim. I swallowed the rage bubbling in my chest. "This house was left to me. It's mine," I said slowly, enunciating each word so there would be no misunderstanding. My father waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, come on. You have your own life now, your own apartment. You don't need this place anymore." Something about his tone made my blood boil. How easily they dismissed me, discarded my attachment to the home I had spent years loving. "You don't need it anymore." As if my childhood, my memories, my connection to the house meant nothing to them. I clenched my fists. "So, what? You think you can just take over without asking me?" "You're overreacting," my mother said in a clipped tone. "This is about practicality. Family comes first, and we need this home more than you do." Need? That word felt like a slap. They didn't need the home. They had simply decided they deserved it more than I did. And the worst part? They truly believed I wouldn't fight back. That was their mistake. If they wanted my childhood home, if they thought I would just hand it over without a second thought, they were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. My family had crossed a line they could never uncross. They had assumed that because I had moved out, because I had built a life elsewhere, my childhood home no longer belonged to me, not just physically, but emotionally. They had dismissed my attachment, erased my history in their minds, and claimed the house as their own, fully expecting that I would just accept it. But what they had never considered was the depth of my determination, the fire that was now ignited inside me. They thought I would roll over, that I would let them take something so deeply tied to who I was, just because they decided I didn't need it anymore. What they didn't realize was that I had already started planning their downfall. I let them believe they had won for a little while. I watched silently as they spoke to contractors and redecorated rooms, stripping the house of the identity I had cherished. They threw away items they deemed old, including pieces of furniture my mother had picked out, childhood belongings that I had stored in the attic, and even photos that had once hung on the walls. Every change they made felt like a personal attack, as if they were erasing me from the home I had loved so much. But I didn't let them see how much it affected me. Instead, I documented everything. Every purchase they made, every renovation they attempted, every conversation they had about making it their own. They thought they were settling in, that this takeover would go smoothly. They thought that by the time I realized what was happening, it would be too late. They were wrong. When the time was right, I pulled out the paperwork proving my legal ownership over the house. The will my grandparents had left behind, clearly naming me as the sole heir to the property. My name was on the deed, the legal documents were ironclad, and no amount of entitlement could override the law. With this undeniable proof in hand, I contacted a lawyer to start preparing an eviction notice. I wasn't just reclaiming my home, I was ensuring that they couldn't worm their way out of consequences. I told my lawyer everything, including their attempts to remove my belongings, their changes to the house without permission, and their complete disregard for the fact that it was still legally mine. The stronger the case, the harder they would fall. Then I struck. I called for another family meeting, much like the one they had ambushed me with before, only this time they had no idea what was coming. As they sat in the living room, in the house they thought had become theirs, I laid the legal papers on the table in front of them. The reaction was immediate. My father picked them up first, his smug confidence melting into confusion as he read through the pages. My mother's expression tightened, her fingers gripping the edge of the couch as realization dawned. My younger brother, who had spent weeks claiming rooms as his own, now sat frozen, eyes darting to the documents as if searching for a loophole, a way out. But there was no way out. They had been caught in their own arrogance, and the truth was staring them in the face. "I own this house," I said, my voice calm, calculated. "Legally, completely. And you? You have no right to be here." My father scoffed, but the edge in his voice betrayed his panic. "This is ridiculous. You live somewhere else. You don't even need this place." I leaned back, arms crossed. "You don't decide what I do and don't need. You decided, without consulting me, to steal something that was never yours. And now you're being evicted." My mother opened her mouth, desperate for damage control. "We're family. You're really willing to throw your family out of their home over paperwork?" That word again. Family. They had used it before as justification for their actions, wielding it as a tool to make me feel guilty, as though my refusal to hand over my home meant I was betraying them. But family wasn't supposed to take what wasn't theirs. Family was supposed to respect boundaries, honor legacies, and understand when they had crossed a line. I stood up, my voice unwavering. "This isn't your home. It was never your home. And you have 2 weeks to leave." The fallout was immediate. My father raged, yelling about fairness and respect, conveniently ignoring the fact that he had shown none of those things to me. My mother tried reasoning, throwing out emotional appeals as if they could override the law. My younger brother sulked, refusing to look at me as the reality of what was happening sank in. But none of it mattered. The eviction notice was filed, and they could either leave willingly or they could be forced out. The weeks that followed were filled with tension. Extended family got involved, whispering about how I had humiliated my parents, how I had been too harsh, how surely I could have found a way to share. But I didn't listen to their attempts at guilt-tripping. They hadn't been there when my belongings were thrown out, when my memories were erased, when my home was stripped bare of its meaning because my family had decided I didn't need it. They hadn't watched their past disappear before their eyes, and so I ignored them, focusing instead on reclaiming what was mine. Finally, the day arrived. My family packed up their things, loading boxes into cars with sour expressions, their entitlement finally crumbling beneath the weight of reality. I watched, standing tall in the doorway, as they left one by one. My father refused to meet my eyes. My mother looked heartbroken, but not because she regretted what they had done, only because they had lost. My younger brother didn't say a word, didn't even glance back at the house he had once tried to call his own, and then they were gone. The house was finally mine again, empty but filled with the echoes of what had happened. But it wasn't just about ownership, it was about restoring its meaning, bringing back the warmth and love that had been tainted by greed. I spent weeks undoing what they had done, replacing everything they had changed, bringing back the pieces that mattered most to me. Friends helped, filling the space with laughter and good memories again, erasing the bitterness that had lingered. My childhood home wasn't just a house. It was my history, my sanctuary, my connection to the people who had truly loved me before all of this happened, and now it was finally back in my hands, untouched by the entitlement that had nearly destroyed it. My family thought I didn't need it anymore, but in the end, I showed them exactly why it was never theirs to take, and I took back everything, in style.